Houston may look like a gleaming metropolis of glass towers and endless freeways today, but beneath all that concrete and steel lies one of the most unlikely success stories in American history. Tonight, we'll discover how a muddy settlement in the middle of nowhere grew into the fourth largest city in the United States, home to over 2 million people. Houston has survived yellow fever epidemics, devastating hurricanes, oil booms, and busts, and even became the launching pad for humanity's greatest adventure into space. We'll start with a surprising discovery deep in the bayous of southeast Texas, and from there, we'll trace the city's remarkable transformation from swampland to space city. So just relax and let your mind wander as we explore the fascinating history of Houston. When you think of Houston today, you might picture the downtown skyline piercing through the humid air, massive oil refineries stretching along the ship channel, or perhaps the iconic Mission Control at NASA. This sprawling urban landscape feels like it has always been here, dominating the flat coastal plains of Texas. But the truth is far more extraordinary. Houston exists where it probably shouldn't, built on land that nature never intended for a major city. The area that would become Houston sits on what geologists call the Gulf Coastal Plain, a vast expanse of marshes, swamps, and prairie that stretches from Louisiana to Mexico. For thousands of years, this was a landscape defined by water. Slow-moving bayous meandered through the wetlands, flooding regularly and creating an environment that seemed better suited for alligators than skyscrapers. Yet here, in this seemingly impossible location, something remarkable would unfold. Houston would not just survive in this challenging environment, it would thrive beyond anyone's wildest imagination. The story of how this happened begins long before any European ever set foot in Texas, with the indigenous peoples who first called this land home. The Karankawa people were among the first to navigate these treacherous waters. They were coastal nomads who understood the rhythms of the bayous and the Gulf of Mexico better than anyone. During the summer months, they would fish and gather shellfish along the coast. When winter arrived, they moved inland to hunt deer and gather pecans in the pine forests. These skilled seafarers travelled in dugout canoes, following the natural waterways that would later become crucial to Houston's development. The Karankawa were joined by other tribes, including the Atakapa and various Caddo groups. These communities had learned to work with the land rather than against it, building temporary shelters that could withstand the frequent floods and storms. They created sophisticated trade networks that stretched hundreds of miles, using the bayous as natural highways for commerce. For centuries, this remained a world apart from European civilization. The Spanish explorers who first mapped the Texas coast in the 1500s found little to interest them here. Unlike the mountainous regions of Mexico, with their promise of gold and silver, the Texas coastal plain offered only endless marshes and hostile tribes. Most Spanish expeditions passed through quickly, eager to reach more promising territories. But the indigenous peoples had discovered something the Spanish missed. The bayous that seemed like obstacles were actually natural transportation corridors. Buffalo Bayou, in particular, wound its way inland for miles, creating a water route that connected the coast to the interior prairies. This would prove to be one of the most important geographical features in Houston's future development. The first European to truly appreciate the potential of this waterway was a French explorer named René Robert Cavelier, Sieur de La Salle. In 1687, La Salle was exploring the Texas coast when he recognized that Buffalo Bayou could serve as a natural harbor, protected from the storms that frequently battered the open Gulf. Though La Salle himself would never return to develop this insight, his observation would prove prophetic. For more than a century after La Salle's exploration, the area remained largely unchanged. Spanish missions were established elsewhere in Texas, but the Houston area was considered too remote and difficult to settle. The few Europeans who ventured here were mostly traders and trappers who came and went with the seasons. Everything changed in 1821 when Mexico gained independence from Spain. The new Mexican government was eager to populate its vast northern territories, and they began offering land grants to anyone willing to establish settlements in Texas. This opened the door for a wave of American colonists who saw opportunity in the empty spaces of the Texas frontier. Among these newcomers was a visionary entrepreneur named Stephen F. Austin, who would become known as the father of Texas. Austin understood that successful colonization required more than just land. It required access to markets. The coastal plains of Texas might be challenging to settle, but they offered something invaluable: direct access to the sea through natural waterways like Buffalo Bayou. Austin's colonists began arriving in the 1820s, and they brought with them a different approach to the landscape. Instead of working around the floods like the indigenous peoples had done, they began the long process of trying to control the water. They dug drainage ditches, built levees, and established settlements on the highest ground they could find. These early settlers faced incredible hardships. Yellow fever and malaria were constant threats in the humid, mosquito-infested climate. Hurricanes regularly swept in from the Gulf, destroying crops and buildings. The soil, while fertile, was difficult to work and prone to flooding. Many colonists gave up and returned east, but those who stayed began to see the potential that lay hidden in the challenging landscape. By the 1830s, small communities were scattered throughout the region. They raised cattle on the coastal prairies, grew cotton in the inland areas, and began to establish trading posts along the major waterways. The population was still tiny by modern standards, perhaps a few thousand people spread across hundreds of square miles, but the foundation for something much larger was being laid. The turning point came in 1836 with the Texas Revolution. When Texas declared independence from Mexico, the new republic faced an enormous challenge. They needed to establish not just a government, but an entire infrastructure for a modern nation. This included choosing locations for cities that could serve as centers of commerce and government. It was at this crucial moment that two brothers from New York arrived in Texas with a plan that would change everything. Augustus Chapman Allen and John Kirby Allen were real estate speculators who had made their fortune buying and selling land in the rapidly growing American frontier. They had studied maps of Texas and identified what they believed was the perfect location for a major city. The Allen brothers chose a spot about 50 miles inland from the Gulf of Mexico, where Buffalo Bayou made a sharp bend as it wound its way toward the coast. The location offered several advantages that the brothers recognized immediately. It was far enough inland to be protected from hurricanes, yet close enough to the Gulf to serve as a port city. The bend in the bayou created a natural harbor where ships could dock safely. Most importantly, the site was positioned at the intersection of several natural transportation routes. In August 1836, just months after the Battle of San Jacinto had secured Texas independence, the Allen brothers purchased 6,642 acres of land along Buffalo Bayou. They paid less than $2 per acre for property that they were convinced would become incredibly valuable. Their confidence was based on a simple but powerful insight. In a rapidly developing region, the city that controlled transportation would control everything else. The brothers immediately began one of the most ambitious marketing campaigns in American history. They named their proposed city Houston after Sam Houston, the hero of the Texas Revolution and the new republic's first president. This was a shrewd political move designed to attract attention and investment from the government of the new nation. But the Allen brothers didn't stop with a famous name. They created elaborate promotional materials that described Houston in terms that bore little resemblance to the muddy bayou settlement that actually existed. According to their advertisements, Houston was destined to become the great commercial metropolis of Texas, a city that would rival New Orleans as a centre of trade and commerce. The reality was far different from the marketing materials. When the first settlers arrived in Houston in late 1836, they found a rough clearing in the forest along Buffalo Bayou. The ground was swampy and prone to flooding. Mosquitoes swarmed in thick clouds during the summer months. The nearest substantial settlement was dozens of miles away, connected only by rough trails through the wilderness. Yet somehow, the Allen brothers' vision began to attract believers. Word spread throughout Texas, and beyond that, a new city was rising on Buffalo Bayou. Settlers began arriving, drawn by cheap land and the promise of opportunity. Many were disappointed by what they found, but others saw the same potential that had attracted the Allen brothers. The early residents of Houston faced challenges that would have defeated a less determined group. The first buildings were crude log structures that offered little protection from the elements. Supplies had to be transported by boat up Buffalo Bayou, a journey that could take days depending on weather and water levels. The threat of disease was constant in the humid, unsanitary conditions, but Houston had one crucial advantage that kept it growing despite these hardships. The Allen brothers had been right about transportation. Buffalo Bayou provided access to the Gulf of Mexico and the markets of the world beyond. As Texas began to develop its economy based on cotton and cattle, Houston's location made it a natural collection point for goods headed to market. By 1837, just 1 year after its founding, Houston had been chosen as the capital of the Republic of Texas. This was exactly what the Allen brothers had hoped for when they named the city after the popular president. Government officials, businessmen, and settlers flocked to the new capital, and the population began to grow rapidly. The decision to make Houston the capital was controversial and would prove to be temporary. Many Texans felt that the city was too small and too remote to serve as the seat of government. Critics pointed out that the grand government buildings described in promotional materials existed only on paper, while legislators were forced to meet in rough wooden structures that leaked when it rained. But even as the capital eventually moved elsewhere, Houston continued to grow. The city's founders had correctly identified its fundamental advantage. In an age when transportation was the key to economic success, Houston's position on Buffalo Bayou gave it access to markets that other inland settlements could only dream of reaching. The first steamboat arrived in Houston in January 1837, marking a turning point in the young city's development. The Laura was a modest vessel, but her arrival demonstrated that Buffalo Bayou was indeed navigable for commercial shipping. Word of the successful voyage spread quickly throughout Texas and the American South, attracting the attention of merchants and investors who had been skeptical of the Allen brothers' grand claims. Within months, a regular steamboat service was established between Houston and Galveston, the port city on the Gulf Coast. This 50-mile water route became Houston's lifeline to the outside world. Cotton bales, lumber, and other goods produced in the Texas interior could now reach international markets without the expensive and dangerous overland journey to established ports in Louisiana or Mexico. The impact was immediate and dramatic. Houston's population doubled, then doubled again. By 1840, what had been a muddy clearing in the forest just 4 years earlier was home to more than 2,000 people. The rough log cabins were being replaced by proper wooden buildings, and the first brick structures were beginning to appear along the main streets. But growth brought new challenges that tested the resolve of Houston's early residents. The city's location in the coastal plains meant that yellow fever was an annual threat during the summer months. The disease carried by mosquitoes that thrived in the humid climate could kill half the population of a settlement in a matter of weeks, as Houston suffered devastating epidemics in 1839, 1844, and 1847 that left hundreds dead and forced many survivors to flee to higher ground. Inland, those who remained developed a grim routine during the fever season. At the first sign of an outbreak, families would pack their belongings and retreat to temporary camps in the pine forests north of the city. business ground to a halt as stores closed and ships avoided the port. The city would become a ghost town until the first frost killed the mosquitoes and made it safe to return. Despite these recurring disasters, Houston continued to attract new residents. The promise of opportunity was stronger than the fear of disease. Cotton planters from the exhausted soils of Georgia and Alabama saw fresh possibilities in the rich Texas prairie. Merchants recognized that a growing region needed commercial centers. Craftsmen and laborers understood that a boom town would pay premium wages for their skills. The diversity of Houston's early population was remarkable for a frontier settlement. Alongside the American settlers came immigrants from Germany, Ireland, and Mexico. A small but significant community of free blacks established itself in the city, working as skilled craftsmen and small business owners. This mixing of cultures created a cosmopolitan atmosphere that set Houston apart from more homogeneous frontier towns. The German immigrants, in particular, played a crucial role in Houston's development. They brought skills in brewing, metalworking, and construction that were badly needed in the growing city. They also brought a different approach to urban planning, advocating for wider streets, better drainage, and more substantial buildings. Many of Houston's early civic improvements can be traced to German influence. By the 1840s, Houston had established itself as the commercial center of Southeast Texas. The city's merchants controlled trade along Buffalo Bayou and the surrounding rivers. Warehouses lined the waterfront, storing cotton, lumber, and manufactured goods, waiting for shipment to New Orleans and beyond. The sound of hammers and saws filled the air as new buildings rose to meet the demands of the growing population. But Houston's success attracted competition. Other Texas cities recognized the advantages of water transportation and began developing their own ports and shipping facilities. Galveston, with its superior natural harbor directly on the Gulf, emerged as Houston's primary rival. Many observers predicted that Galveston would eventually eclipse the inland city, arguing that ships would prefer to dock at a deepwater port rather than navigate the winding channels of Buffalo Bayou. The rivalry between Houston and Galveston would shape both cities for decades to come. Each invested heavily in infrastructure designed to attract trade and population. Galveston built impressive wharves and warehouses that could handle the largest ships of the era. Houston responded by deepening Buffalo Bayou and constructing rail connections that would give it access to the expanding Texas interior. The railroad age arrived in Houston in the 1850s, fundamentally changing the city's relationship with the surrounding region. The first rail line connected Houston to nearby sugar plantations, allowing mill owners to ship their products more efficiently than ever before. Soon, additional lines were planned to connect Houston with Austin, San Antonio, and other growing Texas cities. The Buffalo Bayou, Brazos, and Colorado Railway was completed in 1859, linking Houston to the agricultural regions of central Texas. For the first time, farmers hundreds of miles inland could ship their products to market without relying entirely on wagon trains or river transport. Cotton from as far away as Austin began flowing through Houston's warehouses, dramatically increasing the city's commercial importance. This rail connection also brought new people to Houston. Travelers who had previously bypassed the city now stopped to conduct business or change trains. Some decided to stay, attracted by the opportunities they observed in the bustling commercial center. Hotels, restaurants, and other service businesses flourished as Houston evolved from a frontier settlement into a genuine city. The transformation was visible everywhere. By 1860, Houston boasted gas streetlights, several newspapers, and a variety of churches representing different denominations. The city had its first public school, a small but growing library, and even a theatre company that performed regular shows for increasingly sophisticated audiences. Yet beneath this veneer of civilization, Houston remained a rough and dangerous place. The city's rapid growth had outpaced its ability to maintain law and order. Saloons and gambling halls operated openly, attracting drifters and criminals from across the frontier. Fights were common, and murders occurred with alarming frequency. The volunteer fire department struggled to contain the blazes that regularly swept through the wooden business district. The city's sanitation systems were primitive at best. Open sewers carried waste toward Buffalo Bayou, creating health hazards that contributed to the recurring disease epidemics. Pigs and cattle wandered freely through the streets, adding to the unsanitary conditions. Despite the prosperity that trade had brought, Houston in 1860 was still very much a frontier town, grappling with the challenges of urban life. These problems would soon be overshadowed by a much larger crisis. Tensions between the North and South were reaching a breaking point, and Texas found itself at the center of the brewing conflict. Houston's economy was built on cotton, which meant it was intimately connected to the institution of slavery. When the Civil War began in 1861, the city that had grown from nothing in just 25 years faced its greatest test yet. The war years brought both opportunities and hardships to Houston. The Union naval blockade of southern ports made Houston's inland location an advantage, as blockade runners could still reach the city through the maze of bayous and channels that connected it to the Gulf. The city became a center for Confederate military production, with factories turning out weapons, ammunition, and supplies for Southern forces. But the war also brought shortages, inflation, and the constant fear that Union forces might capture the city. Houston's population fluctuated wildly as men left for military service and refugees arrived from other parts of the Confederacy. The city's prosperity, built on international trade, crumbled as the blockade made normal commerce impossible. The end came suddenly in June 1865, when Union forces occupied Houston without a fight. The Confederate authorities had fled, leaving the city's residents to face an uncertain future under military occupation. The slaves who had built much of Houston's early wealth were suddenly free, creating both opportunities and challenges for the entire community. Reconstruction brought dramatic changes to Houston's social and economic structure. The city's leaders had to rebuild relationships with the federal government while adapting to a new labor system based on free workers rather than enslaved people. Some embraced these changes as opportunities for progress, while others resisted bitterly, creating tensions that would persist for generations. Despite the upheaval, Houston's fundamental advantages remained intact. The city still controlled important transportation routes, and the demand for Texas cotton and other agricultural products continued to grow. As the nation began to heal from the wounds of war, Houston positioned itself to take advantage of new opportunities that were emerging in the rapidly changing American economy. The discovery of oil at Spindletop in 1901 would soon transform Houston beyond recognition, but that revolution was still decades away. For now, the city that had risen from a muddy bayou settlement continued its remarkable evolution, shaped by the vision of its founders, the determination of its residents, and the unique geography that had made it all possible. The period following the Civil War marked a new chapter in Houston's evolution, one that would see the city transform from a regional trading post into a major American metropolis. The challenges were immense, but so were the opportunities that lay ahead. The first task facing Houston's leaders was rebuilding the city's damaged infrastructure. The war had taken its toll on the railroads, warehouses, and shipping facilities that formed the backbone of the local economy. Buffalo Bayou had been neglected during the conflict, and years of silt buildup had made navigation increasingly difficult for larger vessels. But Houston's residents had learned something important during their city's first 3 decades of existence. They had discovered that their community possessed an almost supernatural ability to reinvent itself in the face of adversity. The yellow fever epidemics hadn't stopped growth. The loss of the state capital hadn't prevented prosperity, Even a devastating civil war couldn't break the spirit of a city built on determination and geographic advantage. The reconstruction efforts began almost immediately after Union occupation ended. Local businessmen formed committees to coordinate the rebuilding process, while civic leaders lobbied state and federal authorities for assistance in dredging Buffalo Bayou. The railroad connections that had been damaged during the war were restored and expanded, linking Houston to an even wider network of markets and suppliers. Immigration resumed with a vengeance as word spread that opportunities awaited in the recovering city. This time, the new arrivals came from an even more diverse array of backgrounds. Mexican workers crossed the border seeking employment in construction and transportation. European immigrants, particularly from Germany and Eastern Europe, brought skills in manufacturing and craftsmanship that Houston's growing economy desperately needed. The freed slaves presented both a challenge and an opportunity for the city's development. Many chose to remain in Houston rather than return to rural plantations, creating a substantial urban population of African Americans who sought work in the docks, railroads, and emerging industries. This demographic shift would have profound implications for Houston's social structure and political landscape in the decades to come. By the 1870s, Houston was experiencing growth that surpassed even its pre-war boom years. The population had swelled to nearly 16,000 residents, making it one of the largest cities in Texas. More importantly, the character of the city was changing as it evolved from a frontier trading post into a genuine urban center with increasingly sophisticated institutions and infrastructure. The business district along Main Street showcased this transformation most dramatically. Multi-story brick buildings replaced the wooden structures of earlier decades. Gas lighting illuminated the streets at night, while sidewalks and improved drainage systems made downtown Houston more pleasant and accessible. The first horse-drawn streetcar line began operation in 1874, connecting the business district with residential neighborhoods that were spreading outward from the original town site. Houston's port facilities underwent a dramatic expansion during this period. The federal government finally agreed to fund major improvements to Buffalo Bayou, deepening the channel and removing obstacles that had long hindered navigation. By 1876, ships drawing up to 9 feet of water could reach Houston's wharves, dramatically increasing the size and number of vessels that could serve the port. This improved access to shipping transformed Houston's role in the regional economy. Cotton from across East Texas now flowed through the city's warehouses in unprecedented quantities. Lumber from the vast pine forests of the region joined cotton as a major export, as northern cities, rebuilding after the war, created insatiable demand for construction materials. The railroad network expanded even more rapidly than the port facilities. New lines connected Houston to Dallas, San Antonio, and eventually to rail networks reaching all the way to the Pacific coast. The city became a crucial junction point where goods from across Texas and the Southwest converged before continuing to markets throughout the United States and around the world. This transportation revolution attracted new industries to Houston. Cotton mills were established to process raw cotton into finished textiles. Lumber mills processed the logs that arrived by rail from East Texas forests. Machine shops and foundries produced equipment needed by the railroads and shipping companies that now called Houston home. The industrial development brought new prosperity, but it also created new problems. Air pollution from the mills and foundries began to cloud the skies over Houston. The Buffalo Bayou, already contaminated by sewage from the growing population, now received industrial waste as well. The working-class neighborhoods that housed factory employees often lacked basic services like clean water and adequate sanitation. These environmental and social challenges were largely ignored during the boom years of the 1870s and 1880s. Houston's leaders were focused on growth and opportunity, convinced that progress would eventually solve whatever problems arose along the way. This optimistic outlook would become a defining characteristic of Houston's culture, persisting even as the city grew far beyond what its founders could have imagined. The cultural life of the city flourished alongside its economic development. Houston's first opera house opened in 1873, bringing world-class entertainment to audiences who had previously made do with travelling shows and local amateur productions. The city's newspapers expanded their coverage beyond local business news to include national and international affairs, reflecting the increasingly cosmopolitan outlook of Houston's residents. Educational opportunities also improved dramatically during this period. The Houston public school system was established in 1877, providing free education to children regardless of their families' economic circumstances. Private academies and colleges followed, offering advanced education to those who could afford it. The establishment of these institutions marked Houston's transition from a frontier settlement to a mature city capable of educating its own future leaders. Religious diversity continued to characterize Houston's social landscape. The city's churches represented virtually every major Christian denomination, while Jewish and other religious communities also established congregations. This pluralistic approach to faith reflected the pragmatic attitude that had allowed Houston to thrive as a commercial center where business relationships mattered more than religious or ethnic differences. The 1880s brought new challenges that tested Houston's resilience once again. A series of devastating floods reminded residents that their city remained vulnerable to the natural forces that had shaped the coastal plain for millennia. In 1883, unprecedented rains caused Buffalo Bayou and its tributaries to overflow their banks, inundating much of the downtown area and destroying millions of dollars worth of property. The flood of 1883 was followed by another yellow fever epidemic that killed hundreds and forced thousands to flee the city temporarily. These twin disasters might have crippled a less determined community, but Houston's response demonstrated the remarkable adaptability that had become its trademark. Instead of accepting these setbacks as inevitable, the city's leaders launched ambitious projects designed to prevent similar catastrophes. In the future, flood control became a major priority, with engineers designing levees and drainage systems intended to protect the growing city from future inundations. Public health measures were implemented to reduce the risk of disease epidemics, including improved sewage systems and regulations governing sanitary conditions in residential and commercial areas. These infrastructure improvements were expensive, but they paid dividends by making Houston a more attractive location for businesses and residents who might otherwise have chosen safer locations. The city's reputation for overcoming obstacles actually became a selling point, attracting entrepreneurs and investors who appreciated Houston's proven ability to turn challenges into opportunities. By 1890, Houston's population had reached nearly 28,000, making it the largest city in Texas and one of the major urban centers of the American South. The transformation from Augustus and John Allen's speculative real estate venture had been completed in just over 5 decades. Houston was no longer a frontier town struggling to establish itself, but a genuine metropolis with all the advantages and problems that status entailed. The city's success had not gone unnoticed by observers in other parts of the country. National magazines began featuring articles about Houston's remarkable growth, often focusing on the seemingly impossible task of building a major city in what had been considered unsuitable swampland. These articles attracted even more attention from potential investors and settlers, creating a cycle of publicity and growth that seemed unstoppable. Yet even as Houston celebrated its achievements, forces were already at work that would transform the city once again. Deep beneath the coastal plain, Geological processes that had been occurring for millions of years had created deposits that would soon change not just Houston, but the entire world. The age of oil was about to begin, and Houston would find itself at the center of this new industrial revolution. The signs of what was coming were already visible to those who knew where to look. Small seepages of petroleum had been noted in the region for decades, and enterprising individuals had begun drilling experimental wells in search of this mysterious substance. Most of these early efforts failed, but a few produced enough oil to suggest that larger deposits might exist somewhere beneath the surface. In January 1901, the speculation would end dramatically when a drilling crew near Beaumont, just 90 miles east of Houston, struck the most productive oil well anyone had ever seen. The Spindletop discovery would mark the beginning of Houston's transformation from a cotton and lumber town into the energy capital of the world. But that remarkable story was just beginning to unfold as the 19th century drew to a close. For now, Houston remained what it had been since the Allen brothers first envisioned its possibilities along the banks of Buffalo Bayou. It was a city built on transportation, commerce, and the unshakable belief that any obstacle could be overcome through determination and hard work. The foundation had been laid for something even greater, though few could have imagined just how spectacular Houston's next chapter would prove to be. The morning of January 10th, 1901, dawned like any other in the small town of Beaumont, Texas. Workers at the Spindletop oil drilling site went about their routine, unaware that they were about to witness an event that would reshape not just Texas, but the entire global economy. When the Lucas Gusher erupted that day, shooting oil nearly 200 feet into the air, it announced the arrival of the petroleum age with a roar that could be heard for miles. The impact on Houston was immediate and transformative. Within days of the Spindletop discovery, trains packed with oil speculators, investors, and fortune seekers were streaming into the city. Houston's hotels overflowed with visitors, while tent cities sprang up on the outskirts of town to accommodate the sudden influx of newcomers. The city that had built its prosperity on cotton and lumber suddenly found itself at the center of an entirely new industry. Oil companies materialized almost overnight, many of them establishing their headquarters in Houston rather than in Beaumont near the actual discovery. The reason was simple. Houston's superior transportation infrastructure made it the logical base of operations for the emerging petroleum industry. The railroads that had carried cotton to market could just as easily transport drilling equipment to oil fields. The shipping facilities that had handled lumber exports were perfectly suited for petroleum products. The Texaco Company, originally known as the Texas Company, was founded in Beaumont immediately after Spindletop, but quickly moved its operations to Houston. Other major oil companies followed suit, recognizing that Houston's established business community and transportation networks offered advantages that the rough boom town of Beaumont could not match. By 1902, Houston had become the unofficial capital of the Texas oil industry. The downtown business district buzzed with activity as oil executives negotiated deals in hotel lobbies and makeshift offices. Land prices soared as companies competed for prime locations near the railroads and shipping channels. The city's banks, which had previously financed cotton crops and lumber operations, suddenly found themselves funding oil exploration ventures worth millions of dollars. The transformation was not without its growing pains. Houston's infrastructure, designed for a city of 30,000 people, strained under the pressure of explosive growth. The streets became clogged with wagons hauling drilling equipment, while the hotels and boarding houses could not accommodate all the newcomers seeking lodging. Sanitation systems that had been adequate for the pre-oil era proved woefully inadequate for the booming metropolis Houston was rapidly becoming. Despite these challenges, the city's leaders embraced the oil boom with the same enthusiasm they'd shown for every previous opportunity. Mayor Sam Brashear launched ambitious public works projects designed to modernize Houston's infrastructure and accommodate the growing population. New water and sewer systems were constructed, while the street network was expanded and improved to handle increased traffic. The oil boom also brought unprecedented diversity to Houston's population. Roughnecks from Pennsylvania and West Virginia arrived with experience from the established oil fields. Back east Mexican workers crossed the border seeking employment in the expanding industry. European immigrants, particularly from Eastern Europe, saw opportunities in the booming economy and made their way to Texas. This mixing of cultures created a unique social atmosphere in early 20th century Houston. The city's saloons and restaurants catered to an international clientele, while boarding houses accommodated workers who spoke dozens of different languages. Houston was developing the cosmopolitan character that would define it for generations to come. The economic impact of the oil boom extended far beyond the petroleum industry itself. Houston's existing businesses expanded rapidly to meet the needs of the growing population. Construction companies found themselves overwhelmed with orders for new buildings, both commercial and residential. Retail establishments prospered as oil workers spent their wages on everything from work clothes to luxury goods. The Port of Houston experienced perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all. What had been primarily a cotton and lumber shipping facility rapidly evolved into a major petroleum port. New refineries were constructed along Buffalo Bayou, processing crude oil into gasoline, kerosene, and other products that could be shipped around the world. The Houston Ship Channel, which had been deepened periodically since the 1870s, underwent major improvements to accommodate the larger vessels needed for petroleum transport. Federal funding supported these projects as Washington recognized Houston's growing importance to the national economy. By 1905, ships carrying Houston petroleum products were reaching ports in Europe, South America, and Asia. This international trade brought new wealth to the city, but it also created new vulnerabilities. Houston's economy became increasingly dependent on global oil markets, making the city subject to price fluctuations and international political developments in ways it had never experienced during the cotton era. The oil industry also brought new technologies to Houston that would have lasting impacts on the city's development. Electric lighting became widespread much earlier than it might have otherwise, as oil companies needed reliable illumination for their round-the-clock operations. Telephone systems expanded rapidly to facilitate communication between drilling sites and headquarters. Automobiles, still rare in most American cities, became common sights on Houston streets as oil executives used them for transportation between far-flung facilities. Perhaps most importantly, the oil boom attracted a new class of entrepreneurs and business leaders to Houston. These men, and they were almost exclusively men at the time, brought capital, connections, and ambitions that extended far beyond Texas. They envisioned Houston not just as a regional center, but as a major player in the global economy. Howard Hughes Sr. exemplified this new breed of Houston business leader. Hughes had arrived in the city shortly after Spindletop and quickly established himself as one of the most innovative figures in the oil industry. His Hughes Tool Company revolutionized oil drilling technology with the invention of the rotary drill bit, a device that made it possible to drill deeper and more efficiently than ever before. Hughes and other oil industry pioneers understood that success required more than just finding oil. They needed to create integrated operations that could explore for petroleum, extract it from the ground, refine it into useful products, and transport those products to market. Houston's location and infrastructure made it an ideal base for these complex operations. The city's growing importance in the oil industry attracted the attention of major banks and financial institutions from New York and other established business centers. Branch offices opened in Houston to serve the financing needs of oil companies, while local banks expanded rapidly to handle the flood of petroleum-generated wealth. This influx of capital transformed Houston's business district beyond recognition. Multi-story office buildings rose along Main Street and the surrounding downtown area, housing the headquarters of oil companies, banks, and related businesses. The skyline that had once been dominated by church steeples and modest commercial buildings now featured genuine skyscrapers that announced Houston's arrival as a major American city. The oil boom also had profound social implications for Houston. The sudden wealth generated by petroleum created a new class of millionaires who built mansions in exclusive neighborhoods and patronized the arts on a scale the city had never seen before. At the same time, thousands of oil field workers lived in modest circumstances, creating stark contrasts in wealth and lifestyle. These social tensions were complicated by racial dynamics that reflected the broader patterns of the American South in the early 20th century. The oil industry offered new employment opportunities for workers of all backgrounds, but discrimination and segregation limited the advancement possibilities for African Americans and Mexican Americans. Houston's growth during the oil boom occurred within the framework of Jim Crow laws that enforced racial separation in housing, education, and public accommodations. Despite these limitations, the oil boom created opportunities for entrepreneurship within Houston's minority communities. African American businessmen established enterprises that served the segregated black community, while Mexican American entrepreneurs found niches in construction, transportation, and other industries that supported oil field operations. The environmental consequences of rapid oil industry development were largely ignored during these early boom years. Refineries discharged waste products into Buffalo Bayou and surrounding waterways without regulation. Oil spills contaminated soil and groundwater around drilling sites. The air quality in industrial areas deteriorated as refineries and chemical plants released pollutants without controls. These environmental problems would eventually require attention, but during the first decade of the 20th century, Houston's leaders were focused almost exclusively on growth and economic development. The prevailing attitude was that any problems created by industrial expansion could be solved later through technology and regulation. The 1910 census revealed the dramatic impact of the oil boom on Houston's population. The city now housed more than 78,000 residents, making it not only the largest city in Texas, but one of the fastest growing urban areas in the entire United States. More remarkably, this growth had occurred in less than a decade, demonstrating Houston's capacity for rapid transformation that would become one of its defining characteristics. The oil industry had also changed Houston's relationship with the rest of Texas and the nation. No longer was the city simply a regional trading center serving East Texas cotton farmers and lumber operations. Houston had become a headquarters city where decisions were made that affected oil markets around the world. Business leaders in New York, London, and other financial centers now paid attention to developments in Houston in ways that would have been unthinkable just a few years earlier. This new prominence brought both opportunities and responsibilities. Houston's business community found itself playing an increasingly important role in national economic affairs. The city's banks provided financing for oil exploration projects across Texas and the Southwest. Houston-based companies expanded their operations to Mexico, Venezuela, and other oil-producing regions around the world. The international connections created by the oil industry would prove to be one of Houston's most valuable assets in the decades to come. The city developed expertise in dealing with foreign governments, international law, and global finance that would serve it well as the petroleum industry continued to expand worldwide. By 1915, Houston had firmly established itself as the center of the American oil industry. The major petroleum companies maintained their headquarters in the city, while smaller independent operators looked to Houston for equipment, financing, and expertise. The port handled an increasing volume of petroleum exports, while new pipeline systems connected Houston refineries with oil fields across Texas and the Southwest. The transformation from cotton town to oil capital had been completed in less than 15 years, a pace of change that amazed observers throughout the country. Houston had once again demonstrated its remarkable ability to reinvent itself in response to new opportunities, a characteristic that had first emerged during the city's earliest days along Buffalo Bayou. But even as Houston celebrated its success in the petroleum industry, new challenges and opportunities were already emerging on the horizon. World War I would create unprecedented demand for oil products, while also demonstrating the strategic importance of energy resources to national security. Houston's role in supplying fuel for the American war effort would further enhance the city's national prominence and set the stage for even greater growth in the decades ahead. The war years also brought new technologies and industries to Houston that would eventually rival oil in their importance to the city's economy. Chemical manufacturing, shipbuilding, and aerospace industries would all trace their Houston origins to developments during the World War I era. The city that had begun as a speculative real estate venture in a Texas swamp was evolving into something its founders could never have imagined, a diversified industrial metropolis with global reach and influence. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 initially seemed like a distant European conflict that would have little impact on Houston's booming oil industry. But as the war dragged on and the United States moved closer to involvement, it became clear that petroleum would play a crucial role in determining the outcome of the conflict. Ships, tanks, aircraft, and trucks all required fuel, and the nations with reliable access to oil would hold significant advantages over those without it. Houston found itself at the center of this new strategic reality. The city's refineries worked around the clock to produce aviation gasoline for military aircraft, while its port facilities handled increasing volumes of petroleum exports to Britain and France. The federal government recognized Houston's importance to the war effort and invested heavily in expanding the city's industrial capacity. The war brought unprecedented prosperity to Houston, but it also created new challenges. Labor shortages developed as workers left for military service or moved to higher-paying jobs in other war industries. The city's infrastructure struggled to keep pace with rapid industrial expansion, while housing shortages forced thousands of workers to live in substandard conditions. Women entered the Houston workforce in unprecedented numbers during the war years, taking jobs in refineries, offices, and other industries that had previously employed only men. This social transformation would have lasting effects on the city's culture, even after many women returned to traditional roles following the war's end. The armistice in November 1918 brought new uncertainties to Houston's economy. Military contracts were cancelled overnight, and demand for petroleum products dropped sharply as wartime production ended. Many observers predicted that Houston would experience a severe economic downturn as the city adjusted to peacetime conditions. Instead, Houston's business leaders demonstrated the same adaptability that had characterized the city since its founding. They quickly identified new markets for petroleum products as civilian industries converted from wartime to peacetime production. The growing popularity of automobiles created expanding demand for gasoline, while new petrochemical processes opened entirely new markets for oil-derived products. The 1920s brought a second wave of growth that in many ways exceeded even the original oil boom. Houston's population surged past 140,000 by 1920 and continued climbing throughout the decade. New skyscrapers transformed the downtown skyline, while residential neighborhoods spread outward in all directions from the city center. The automobile revolution had a particularly dramatic impact on Houston's development patterns. Unlike older cities that had grown up around streetcar lines and railroad stations, Houston expanded during the age of the automobile. This timing would have profound implications for the city's eventual form and character. Suburban developments began appearing on the outskirts of Houston during the 1920s, connected to downtown by new roads and highways rather than rail lines. These neighborhoods offered single-family homes with yards and garages, appealing to the growing number of families who could afford automobiles and wanted to escape the congestion and pollution of the industrial areas near downtown. The oil industry continued to drive Houston's growth, but the city's economy was becoming increasingly diversified. Chemical companies established major facilities along the Houston Ship Channel, taking advantage of the abundant petroleum feedstocks and transportation infrastructure. These plants produced everything from synthetic fertilizers to industrial chemicals used in manufacturing processes around the world. Rice University, founded in 1912, began to play an increasingly important role in Houston's development during the 1920s. The university attracted faculty and students from around the country, while its research programs began contributing to technological advances in the oil and chemical industries. The presence of a major research university gave Houston intellectual resources that many other oil-centered cities lacked. The Port of Houston underwent dramatic expansion during this period as well. New terminals were constructed to handle the growing volume of petroleum and chemical exports, while the ship channel was deepened once again to accommodate larger vessels. By 1925, Houston ranked among the busiest ports in the United States, handling cargo destined for markets throughout the Americas, and beyond. Cultural institutions flourished alongside economic growth. The Houston Symphony Orchestra was founded in 1913 and gained national recognition during the 1920s. Museums, libraries, and theaters provided entertainment and education for the city's increasingly sophisticated population. Houston was shedding its frontier image and taking on the characteristics of a mature metropolitan area. The city's architecture during this period reflected both its newfound wealth and its aspirations for the future. Art Deco buildings rose in the downtown business district, while residential areas featured styles ranging from Spanish colonial revival to Tudor revival. Houston's builders were drawing inspiration from architectural trends in New York, Los Angeles, and other major American cities. But beneath this veneer of prosperity, Houston remained vulnerable to the same natural forces that had threatened the city since its founding. The hurricane of September 1900 had devastated nearby Galveston, killing thousands and demonstrating the awesome power of Gulf Coast storms. Houston had been spared the worst of that disaster, but residents understood that their city remained exposed to similar threats. Flooding continued to plague Houston throughout the 1920s, despite ongoing efforts to improve drainage and flood control systems. The flat terrain and heavy rainfall that characterized the region made flooding an almost annual occurrence in some parts of the city. Each major flood prompted new engineering studies and construction projects, but the fundamental challenge of building a major city in a low-lying coastal plain remained. The discovery of new oil fields in East Texas during the late 1920s brought another wave of growth to Houston. The city served as the financial and logistical center for development of these new petroleum resources, while Houston-based companies expanded their operations throughout the region. Geologists, engineers, and other technical specialists made Houston their base of operations, further cementing the city's position as the capital of the American oil industry. The stock market crash of October 1929 sent shockwaves through the American economy, but Houston initially seemed insulated from the worst effects of the financial collapse. Oil prices remained relatively stable, and demand for petroleum products continued as Americans relied on automobiles and other oil-consuming technologies regardless of economic conditions. This apparent immunity to the Great Depression proved to be temporary. By 1931, falling oil prices and reduced industrial activity had created significant unemployment in Houston. Construction projects were cancelled or postponed, while many businesses struggled to survive the economic downturn. The discovery of the massive East Texas oil field in 1930 initially seemed like good news for Houston, but it quickly created new problems. The field was so productive that it flooded the market with crude oil, driving prices down to levels that threatened the profitability of the entire industry. Houston's economy, so dependent on petroleum, suffered accordingly. Oil companies based in Houston found themselves caught in a destructive cycle of overproduction and falling prices. Many smaller firms went bankrupt, while larger companies survived only by cutting costs and laying off workers. The city that had grown rich from oil discovered how quickly petroleum wealth could disappear when market conditions changed. The federal government eventually intervened to stabilize oil prices through production quotas and other regulatory measures, but the damage to Houston's economy had been severe. Unemployment reached levels not seen since the city's earliest days, while many of the grand development projects of the 1920s remained unfinished. Despite these setbacks, Houston's business community once again demonstrated the resilience that had characterized the city since its founding. Local leaders worked with federal agencies to develop public works projects that would provide employment while improving the city's infrastructure. The Works Progress Administration funded improvements to parks, roads, and public buildings throughout Houston. The petrochemical industry provided one bright spot during the otherwise difficult 1930s. Companies like Dow Chemical and DuPont established major facilities in the Houston area, taking advantage of abundant petroleum feedstocks and skilled workers displaced from other industries. These plants produced synthetic materials that were beginning to revolutionize manufacturing throughout the United States. The approach of World War II created new opportunities for Houston's recovery from the Great Depression. The federal government began investing heavily in defense industries, and Houston's strategic location and industrial infrastructure made it an ideal site for military production facilities. Shipyards were constructed along the Houston Ship Channel, while aircraft manufacturing plants were established in the surrounding area. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 transformed Houston overnight, from a struggling oil town into a crucial center of American war production. The city's refineries worked around the clock to produce aviation gasoline and other petroleum products essential to the war effort, while its chemical plants manufactured explosives, synthetic rubber, and other materials needed by the military. Houston's population surged during the war years as workers flocked to the city seeking employment in defense industries. The federal government constructed massive housing projects to accommodate the influx of new residents, while private developers rushed to build additional housing and commercial facilities. The diversity of Houston's wartime population was remarkable. Workers arrived from across the United States, joined by immigrants from Mexico and other Latin American countries. Women once again entered the workforce in large numbers, taking jobs in shipyards, aircraft factories, and other industries that had traditionally employed only men. African American workers found new opportunities in Houston's wartime industries, though they continued to face discrimination and segregation in housing and public accommodations. The combination of economic opportunity and social restriction created tensions that would eventually contribute to the civil rights movement in Houston and throughout the South. The end of World War II in 1945 brought another period of uncertainty to Houston. Once again, military contracts were cancelled and defense workers faced unemployment. Many observers predicted a return to the economic difficulties of the 1930s as the city adjusted to peacetime conditions. Instead, Houston entered a period of sustained growth that would continue for decades. The city had emerged from the war with vastly expanded industrial capacity and a diversified economic base that extended far beyond the oil industry. Petrochemicals, aerospace, shipping and manufacturing all contributed to Houston's post-war prosperity. The development of the interstate highway system during the 1950s and 1960s reinforced Houston's position as a transportation hub. Major highways converged on the city from all directions, while the Houston Ship Channel continued to handle increasing volumes of international trade. The combination of water, rail, highway, and eventually air transportation gave Houston unparalleled access to markets throughout the world. The space program brought entirely new industries to Houston during the 1960s. When NASA selected the city as the site for its manned spacecraft center, it marked Houston's emergence as a center for high-technology industries. The space program attracted aerospace companies, electronics manufacturers, and research institutions that further diversified the local economy. The selection of Houston for the space program was not accidental. The city's established aerospace industry, proximity to the Gulf of Mexico for water recovery of space capsules, and strong political support from Texas politicians all contributed to the decision. But perhaps most importantly, Houston had demonstrated over more than a century that it could successfully manage large-scale technological and industrial projects. The famous phrase, "Houston, we have a problem," from the Apollo 13 mission symbolized the city's central role in humanity's greatest adventure. Mission Control in Houston became the nerve center for space exploration, coordinating complex operations that captured the imagination of people around the world. By 1970, Houston had become the sixth largest city in the United States, with a metropolitan area population approaching 2 million. The transformation from Augustus and John Allen's speculative real estate venture had been completed on a scale that defied imagination. Houston had become exactly what its founders had envisioned, a great commercial metropolis that served as a gateway between Texas and the world beyond. But even as Houston celebrated its achievements in oil, petrochemicals, shipping and space exploration, new challenges were emerging that would test the city's adaptability. Once again, environmental concerns about air and water pollution were growing, while social tensions related to racial inequality and economic disparity demanded attention. The oil industry that had built Houston's fortune was also becoming increasingly volatile, subject to international political developments and price fluctuations that could dramatically impact the local economy. The Arab oil embargo of 1973 demonstrated Houston's continued vulnerability to forces beyond its control, even as it brought unprecedented prosperity to the city's energy companies. Houston's response to these challenges would determine whether the city could maintain its remarkable trajectory of growth and success. The same spirit of innovation and determination that had built a major metropolis in an unlikely location would be needed to navigate the complexities of the modern world. The story of Houston's rise from swampland to space city was far from over. New chapters were still being written as the city continued to evolve and adapt to changing circumstances. But the foundation, laid over more than a century of growth and development, had created something truly extraordinary. A city that had learned how to thrive by embracing change and turning challenges into opportunities. The 1970s marked a turning point in Houston's evolution as the city grappled with the consequences of its remarkable success. The rapid growth that had transformed a bayou settlement into a major metropolis had created problems that demanded immediate attention. Air pollution from refineries and chemical plants had reached alarming levels, while the flat terrain and concrete sprawl contributed to increasingly severe flooding during heavy rainstorms. The environmental challenges were compounded by social tensions that had been building for decades. Houston's African American community long confined to segregated neighborhoods and excluded from many economic opportunities, began demanding equal access to jobs, housing, and public accommodations. The civil rights movement that had transformed other southern cities was finally reaching Houston, challenging the racial hierarchy that had persisted since the city's founding. These pressures converged during the hot summer of 1967, when racial tensions erupted into violence in Houston's predominantly black neighborhoods. The riots that swept through the Third Ward and other areas shocked many white residents who had believed that Houston's economic prosperity had somehow insulated the city from the social problems plaguing other American urban centers. The aftermath of the riots forced Houston's leadership to confront uncomfortable truths about inequality and discrimination that had been largely ignored during the boom years. City officials launched programs designed to improve conditions in minority neighborhoods, while businesses began slowly opening previously closed doors to African American workers and professionals. Progress was uneven and often grudging, but Houston's pragmatic business culture eventually embraced integration as both morally necessary and economically beneficial. The city's leaders understood that Houston could not compete for talent and investment if it remained divided by racial barriers. This practical approach to civil rights would become another defining characteristic of Houston's development. The 1973 Arab oil embargo created a different kind of crisis for Houston, one that paradoxically brought both tremendous opportunity and sobering vulnerability. When Middle Eastern oil producers restricted shipments to the United States, petroleum prices skyrocketed overnight. Houston's energy companies suddenly found themselves sitting on reserves worth billions of dollars, while the city's economy experienced another spectacular boom. Downtown Houston transformed dramatically during the oil price surge of the 1970s. Glass and steel skyscrapers rose at a pace that amazed even long-time residents accustomed to rapid change. The Pennzoil Place Towers, completed in 1976, symbolized Houston's emergence as a truly international city. Their innovative design and imposing height announced that Houston had joined the ranks of world-class urban centers. The construction boom extended far beyond the central business district. Shopping malls, office parks, and residential subdivisions spread across the Houston metropolitan area at an unprecedented pace. The Galleria area, once prairie land on the city's western edge, emerged as a major commercial center, rivaling downtown in its concentration of office buildings and retail establishments. This explosive growth during the 1970s attracted newcomers from around the world. Mexican immigrants continued to arrive, seeking opportunities in construction and service industries, while professionals from India, Pakistan, and other countries came to work in Houston's expanding medical and technology sectors. The city's international character deepened as communities from dozens of nations established themselves in neighborhoods throughout the metropolitan area. The Texas Medical Center, which had begun developing in the 1940s, emerged as another pillar of Houston's diversified economy. During this period, major hospitals and research institutions established world-renowned programs in cancer treatment, heart surgery, and other medical specialties. The medical center became a destination for patients from across the United States and around the world, while also serving as a major employer for thousands of Houston residents. Houston's success in attracting diverse industries created a sense of confidence that bordered on invincibility. The city had weathered the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and various economic downturns while continuing to grow and prosper. Local boosters proclaimed that Houston was recession-proof, protected by its diversified economy and strategic location. This optimism was reinforced by the city's response to Hurricane Alicia in 1983. The powerful storm caused extensive damage throughout the Houston area, knocking out power to millions of residents and destroying billions of dollars worth of property but the recovery was swift and comprehensive, demonstrating Houston's ability to bounce back from natural disasters just as it had from economic challenges. The space program continued to enhance Houston's international reputation throughout the 1970s and 1980s. The successful moon landings had made Houston a household word around the world, while ongoing shuttle missions kept the city in the global spotlight. The Johnson Space Center became a major tourist attraction, drawing visitors who wanted to see the nerve center of America's space exploration efforts. But Houston's greatest test was yet to come. The mid-1980s brought a collapse in oil prices that devastated the city's economy with shocking suddenness. Petroleum that had sold for nearly $40 per barrel in the early 1980s dropped to less than $10 by 1986. The impact on Houston was catastrophic. Construction projects ground to a halt as financing dried up. Office buildings that had been symbols of prosperity stood empty as energy companies went bankrupt or drastically reduced their operations. Unemployment soared to levels not seen since the Great Depression, while home values plummeted as desperate residents tried to sell property in a market with no buyers. The psychological impact was perhaps even more severe than the economic damage. Houston had prided itself on being different from older industrial cities that had experienced decline. The city's leaders had believed that diversification and geographic advantages would protect Houston from the kind of economic collapse that had devastated Detroit and other Rust Belt centers. The oil bust of the 1980s shattered these illusions and forced Houston to confront the reality that no city, regardless of its past success, was immune to economic forces beyond its control. The crisis prompted soul-searching about Houston's future and its relationship with the volatile energy industry that had built the modern city. Recovery began slowly in the late 1980s as Houston's leaders launched efforts to attract new industries and reduce the city's dependence on oil and gas. The port continued to handle increasing volumes of international trade, while the medical center and aerospace industries provided stability during the energy sector's struggles. These efforts gradually began to pay dividends as the 1990s brought renewed growth. The North American Free Trade Agreement, implemented in 1994, provided a major boost to Houston's economy by increasing trade with Mexico. The city's location and transportation infrastructure made it an ideal gateway for goods flowing between Mexico and the rest of the United States. New warehouses and distribution centers were constructed to handle the growing volume of cross-border commerce. Immigration from Latin America accelerated during this period, transforming Houston's demographic composition. Spanish became increasingly common on the city's streets, while Mexican and Central American restaurants, markets, and cultural institutions proliferated throughout the metropolitan area. Houston was becoming one of the most Hispanic cities in the United States. The technology boom of the 1990s also benefited Houston, though to a lesser extent than cities like Austin and Dallas. The medical center attracted biotechnology companies, while the energy industry's increasing use of computer technology created opportunities for software developers and other high-tech workers. Houston began shedding its image as an old-fashioned oil town and positioning itself as a center for advanced industries. The new millennium brought fresh challenges and opportunities to Houston. The September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks highlighted the vulnerability of the city's petrochemical infrastructure to security threats, leading to massive investments in protective measures around refineries and chemical plants. The attacks also reinforced Houston's importance to national security as a center of energy production and processing. Hurricane Katrina in 2005 demonstrated Houston's capacity for humanitarian response on a massive scale. The city welcomed more than 100,000 evacuees from New Orleans, providing shelter, medical care, and assistance in rebuilding lives shattered by the storm. Many of these evacuees chose to remain permanently in Houston, adding to the city's cultural diversity. The energy boom of the 2000s, driven by new drilling technologies that made previously inaccessible oil and gas reserves economically viable, brought another wave of prosperity to Houston. The Eagle Ford Shale and Permian Basin discoveries created thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in investment, much of it flowing through Houston-based companies. This latest energy boom was different from previous cycles in several important ways. Environmental concerns about hydraulic fracturing and climate change created political and social pressures that had not existed during earlier oil booms. Houston found itself at the center of national debates about energy policy, environmental protection, and the role of fossil fuels in a changing world. The city's response to these challenges reflected the pragmatic approach that had characterized Houston since its founding. Rather than ignoring environmental concerns, many Houston-based energy companies began investing heavily in cleaner technologies and renewable energy sources. The city that had built its fortune on oil and gas began positioning itself as a leader in the transition to a more sustainable energy future. Hurricane Harvey in 2017 provided another test of Houston's resilience. The storm dumped more than 50 inches of rain on parts of the metropolitan area, causing catastrophic flooding that affected hundreds of thousands of residents. The disaster was made worse by Houston's rapid development in flood-prone areas and the effects of climate change on storm intensity. The response to Harvey demonstrated both Houston's strengths and its ongoing vulnerabilities. The city's diverse population came together in remarkable displays of mutual aid and community support. Volunteers with boats rescued stranded residents, while churches, schools, and other institutions provided shelter and supplies to flood victims. The spirit of cooperation and determination that had built Houston from a swamp was clearly still alive. But Harvey also exposed serious flaws in Houston's approach to development and flood control. Decades of unregulated growth in floodplains had put hundreds of thousands of people at risk, while inadequate drainage systems were overwhelmed by the unprecedented rainfall. The disaster prompted calls for fundamental changes in how Houston manages development and prepares for future storms. Today, Houston stands at another crossroads in its remarkable history. The city has grown to become the fourth largest in the United States, with a metropolitan area population approaching 7 million people. It remains a global center for energy, medicine, aerospace, and international trade. The diversity that has characterized Houston since its early days has reached unprecedented levels, with residents representing virtually every nation on Earth. The challenges facing modern Houston are as complex as any the city has confronted. Climate change threatens to bring more frequent and severe storms, while rising sea levels could eventually threaten the low-lying coastal areas where Houston was built. Economic inequality has grown alongside overall prosperity, creating social tensions that demand attention. The energy industry that built Houston faces an uncertain future as the world grapples with the need to reduce carbon emissions. Yet Houston's history suggests reasons for optimism about the city's ability to navigate these challenges successfully. From the beginning, Houston has been a city of adaptation and reinvention. The muddy settlement along Buffalo Bayou has repeatedly transformed itself in response to changing circumstances, emerging stronger from each crisis and setback. The entrepreneurs who built Houston's oil industry also created the foundations for its diversification into chemicals, aerospace, and medicine. The immigrants who have continually replenished the city's population have brought new ideas, skills, and perspectives that have kept Houston dynamic and forward-looking. The pragmatic business culture that has long characterized the city has consistently chosen practical solutions over ideological purity. Houston's greatest strength may be its refusal to be limited by conventional wisdom about what is possible. The city exists where geography suggested it should not, built by people who refused to accept that swamps could not become sites of great cities. This willingness to attempt the seemingly impossible has driven Houston's development from its earliest days and continues to shape its evolution today. The story of Houston's rise from a speculative real estate venture to one of America's great cities is ultimately a story about human ambition and adaptability. It demonstrates what can be achieved when vision, determination, and favorable circumstances combine to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. As Houston faces an uncertain future, these same qualities that built the space city from a Texas swamp remain its greatest assets for whatever transformations lie ahead. The energy industry that had defined Houston for over a century was entering a period of unprecedented change by the 2010s. New technologies like horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing had unlocked vast reserves of oil and natural gas across Texas, creating another boom cycle that brought fresh waves of investment and employment to the city. But this latest energy renaissance was accompanied by growing awareness that the age of fossil fuels might be drawing to a close. Houston's response to this emerging reality demonstrated the same adaptability that had allowed the city to survive and thrive through previous transformations. Rather than clinging to traditional energy sources, many Houston-based companies began investing heavily in renewable energy technologies. Wind farms sprouted across Texas, while solar installations became increasingly common throughout the region. The expertise in large-scale energy projects that Houston had developed over decades proved readily transferable to these new technologies. The Port of Houston underwent another major expansion during this period, cementing its position as one of the busiest waterways in the United States. Container ships from Asia discharged manufactured goods that were distributed throughout the American heartland, while agricultural products from the Midwest flowed through Houston to markets around the world. The city's role as a global trading hub continued to grow, even as its traditional energy dominance faced new challenges. Immigration patterns during the 2010s reflected Houston's increasingly international character. Communities from Nigeria, Ethiopia, and other African nations established themselves alongside the existing populations from Mexico, Vietnam, India, and dozens of other countries. The city's restaurants began offering cuisines from every continent, while cultural festivals celebrated traditions from around the globe. Houston was becoming one of the most diverse cities in human history. This diversity created both opportunities and tensions. The economic benefits of immigration were undeniable, as newcomers started businesses, filled essential jobs, and contributed to the tax base that funded city services. But the rapid pace of demographic change also created anxiety among some longtime residents who worried that their familiar communities were disappearing. Political debates about immigration policy often played out with particular intensity in Houston, where the human consequences of national policies were visible on every street corner. The technology sector began playing an increasingly important role in Houston's economy during this period. The medical center attracted biotechnology companies developing new treatments for cancer, heart disease, and other conditions. Energy companies invested heavily in artificial intelligence and data analytics to optimize their operations. The combination of traditional industries and emerging technologies created a unique ecosystem that set Houston apart from other major cities. Hurricane Harvey's devastating impact in August 2017 served as a stark reminder that Houston's relationship with water remained as complicated as ever. The storm stalled over southeast Texas for days, dumping record-breaking amounts of rain that overwhelmed drainage systems and flooded hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses. The disaster exposed decades of questionable development decisions that had placed communities in harm's way while destroying natural flood control systems. The recovery from Harvey demonstrated both Houston's resilience and its ongoing vulnerabilities. Neighbors helped neighbors in countless acts of heroism and generosity, while the city's business community mobilized resources to assist with rescue and relief efforts. But the rebuilding process also revealed persistent inequalities, as affluent neighborhoods recovered quickly, while low-income communities struggled to access assistance and resources. Climate scientists warned that Harvey was likely a preview of future storms, intensified by rising global temperatures. The combination of more frequent extreme weather events and continued development in flood-prone areas posed existential challenges for a city built on low-lying coastal plains. Houston's leaders began grappling with the need for fundamental changes in how the city approached land use, infrastructure, and disaster preparedness. The COVID-19 pandemic that began in 2020 brought yet another test of Houston's adaptability. The city's economy, heavily dependent on international trade and energy markets, suffered severe disruptions as global commerce ground to a halt. The medical center found itself at the forefront of treating patients and developing treatments for a disease that initially baffled health professionals worldwide. But Houston's diversity and economic base helped cushion the impact of the pandemic in ways that might not have been possible in more specialized cities. The port continued operating as an essential service, while energy companies adapted to remote work arrangements. The technology sector actually expanded during the pandemic as businesses throughout the region accelerated their digital transformation efforts. The energy transition accelerated during the pandemic years as governments and corporations around the world announced ambitious climate goals. Houston found itself uniquely positioned to play a leading role in this transformation. With its concentration of energy expertise, infrastructure, and capital companies that had built their fortunes extracting fossil fuels, began investing heavily in carbon capture, hydrogen production, and other technologies that could help reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The space industry continued to evolve as well, with private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin joining NASA as major players in space exploration and commercialization. Houston's Johnson Space Center remained a crucial hub for human spaceflight, while the city's aerospace companies adapted to serve both government and commercial markets. The dream of space exploration that had captivated the world during the Apollo era was being transformed into a growing industry with practical applications for communications, navigation, and scientific research. Immigration patterns shifted during the pandemic years, as remote work arrangements allowed people to live in locations previously constrained by job requirements. Houston benefited from this trend, as workers from expensive coastal cities discovered that they could maintain their careers while enjoying Houston's lower cost of living and more spacious housing options. The city's lack of zoning restrictions, long criticized by urban planners, became an advantage as developers could quickly respond to changing housing demands. The 2020 census revealed that Houston had become a majority-minority city, with no single ethnic or racial group comprising more than half the population. This demographic milestone reflected decades of immigration and internal migration that had transformed the city from its origins as a predominantly white southern settlement. The change was most visible in the city's schools, where students spoke dozens of languages and represented cultures from every corner of the globe. Political power began shifting to reflect these demographic changes, though often slowly and incompletely. Hispanic and Asian American candidates won increasing numbers of elected offices, while African American politicians continued to play important roles in city government. The business community, long dominated by white men from traditional Texas families, gradually began reflecting the city's diversity as immigrants and their children achieved economic success. The cultural implications of Houston's transformation were perhaps even more significant than the political changes. The city's music scene, which had long been known for blues, country, and later hip-hop, expanded to include genres from around the world. Museums began featuring exhibitions that reflected the global nature of Houston's population, while festivals celebrating everything from Vietnamese New Year to Nigerian independence drew crowds from across the metropolitan area. Food became one of the most visible expressions of Houston's diversity. The city's restaurant scene evolved from traditional Southern and Tex-Mex establishments to include authentic cuisines from virtually every nation on Earth. Food trucks serving Korean tacos, Ethiopian injera, and Salvadoran pupusas became common sights on Houston streets. The city that had once been known primarily for barbecue and chicken fried steak was developing a reputation as one of America's great food destinations. Sports played an important role in creating shared experiences that brought together Houston's diverse communities. The Astros World Series championship in 2017, coming just weeks after Hurricane Harvey, provided a moment of citywide celebration that transcended ethnic and economic divisions. The team's subsequent success helped maintain civic pride, even as the city grappled with ongoing challenges related to growth, inequality, and environmental concerns. The downtown area continued evolving as developers converted office buildings to residential use and created mixed-use districts that combined living, working, and entertainment spaces. The addition of light rail lines helped connect downtown with other parts of the metropolitan area, though Houston remained heavily dependent on automobiles for transportation. The city's freeway system, once a source of pride, increasingly became a source of frustration as traffic congestion worsened and infrastructure aged. Urban planners began advocating for more sustainable development patterns that could reduce Houston's vulnerability to flooding while creating more walkable neighborhoods. The Buffalo Bayou Park project, which restored natural habitat along the waterway that had given birth to the city, became a model for how Houston might balance development with environmental protection. Similar projects began appearing in other parts of the metropolitan area as residents demanded better quality of life amenities. The energy industry's transformation accelerated through the early 2020s as major oil companies announced plans to achieve net zero carbon emissions. By mid-century, Houston-based firms invested billions of dollars in technologies like carbon capture and storage, while also expanding their renewable energy portfolios. The city that had built its modern identity on fossil fuel extraction was positioning itself to lead the transition to a cleaner energy future. Venture capital investment in Houston startups reached record levels as entrepreneurs developed solutions to problems ranging from medical diagnostics to space exploration. The combination of traditional industry expertise, world-class research institutions, and abundant capital created an environment where innovation could flourish. Young professionals who might once have left Houston for opportunities in Silicon Valley or New York increasingly found reasons to remain in their hometown. The ongoing challenges remained formidable despite these positive developments. Income inequality persisted as a major problem, with stark disparities between affluent suburban neighborhoods and struggling inner-city communities. The lack of comprehensive public transportation limited opportunities for residents without access to reliable vehicles. Air quality, while improved from the worst days of the 1970s, still posed health risks during certain weather conditions. Housing affordability emerged as a growing concern as Houston's success attracted new residents faster than the housing stock could expand. Neighborhoods that had once been accessible to working-class families experienced rapid gentrification that displaced long-time residents. The city's traditional approach of unlimited suburban sprawl was being constrained by infrastructure limitations and environmental concerns. The relationship between Houston and the rest of Texas became increasingly complex as the state's major cities grew more diverse, while rural areas remained predominantly white and conservative political battles over voting rights, immigration, and environmental regulation often pitted Houston's interests against those of the state legislature. The city that had once epitomized Texas values found itself increasingly at odds with the political coalition that controlled state government. International events continued to shape Houston's development in ways that would have surprised the city's founders. Trade wars disrupted established commerce patterns, while conflicts in Europe and the Middle East affected global energy markets. Houston's role as a global city meant that decisions made in Beijing, Moscow, or Brussels could have immediate impacts on local employment and economic conditions. The COVID-19 pandemic's long-term effects on work patterns and urban development remained unclear as Houston entered the mid-2020s. Remote work arrangements had reduced demand for downtown office space, while increasing interest in suburban housing with home offices. The implications for Houston's development patterns, already heavily suburban, were still being debated by planners and policymakers. Climate change posed perhaps the most fundamental long-term challenge to Houston's continued growth and prosperity. Rising sea levels threatened the ship channel and petrochemical infrastructure that remained central to the regional economy. More frequent and severe storms could overwhelm even improved flood control systems, while extreme heat might make outdoor work increasingly dangerous during summer months. Yet Houston's history suggested grounds for cautious optimism about the city's ability to adapt to these challenges. The same entrepreneurial spirit that had built a great city in an unlikely location continued to drive innovation in energy, medicine, aerospace, and other fields. The diversity that had enriched Houston's culture also provided a wealth of perspectives and experiences that could inform solutions to complex problems. The city's greatest asset remained its people and their willingness to embrace change rather than resist it. From the Allen brothers' original vision to the latest wave of immigrants pursuing their own American dreams, Houston had always been built by individuals willing to take risks and work hard to achieve their goals. This tradition of innovation and determination provided the foundation for whatever transformations lay ahead. As Houston looked toward the future, the challenges were undeniably serious but not insurmountable for a city that had already overcome so much. The swamp town that had become the space city was preparing for its next great transformation, confident that the same qualities that had driven its remarkable rise would guide it successfully through whatever came next. The story of Houston's evolution, from muddy bayou settlement to global metropolis, was far from finished, with new chapters yet to be written by the millions who called the city home. The transformation that began in the 2020s would accelerate through the remainder of the decade, reshaping Houston in ways that even its most visionary leaders could barely comprehend. The city's response to climate change challenges sparked innovations that extended far beyond environmental protection, creating entirely new industries and attracting global attention to Houston's latest reinvention. The massive infrastructure investments required to protect Houston from future flooding became catalysts for technological breakthroughs that other coastal cities around the world began studying and adopting. Advanced drainage systems incorporated artificial intelligence to predict and manage water flow, while innovative building materials developed in Houston laboratories offered superior flood resistance without sacrificing aesthetic appeal. The city that had once ignored environmental concerns was becoming a laboratory for sustainable urban development. The energy sector's transformation reached a tipping point during this period as renewable energy generation in Texas surpassed fossil fuel production for extended periods throughout the year. Houston-based companies that had dominated oil and gas markets for decades successfully pivoted to become leaders in wind, solar, and emerging technologies like hydrogen fuel cells. The expertise gained from managing complex energy systems proved readily transferable to these cleaner alternatives. Carbon capture and storage emerged as a particularly important industry cluster in Houston, taking advantage of the region's extensive pipeline infrastructure and geological formations suitable for long-term carbon sequestration companies that had once extracted hydrocarbons from underground reservoirs, now pumped carbon dioxide into those same formations, creating a circular economy that addressed climate concerns while maintaining high-paying technical jobs. The space industry experienced another renaissance as private companies established major operations throughout the Houston metropolitan area. The Johnson Space Center remained NASA's crown jewel, but it was now joined by manufacturing facilities producing satellites, spacecraft components, and specialized materials for the growing space economy. Tourism related to space exploration became a significant economic driver as visitors from around the world came to witness rocket launches and explore interactive exhibits showcasing humanity's expansion beyond Earth. Houston's medical sector continued expanding its global reach during this period, with the Texas Medical Center becoming a destination for patients and researchers from every continent. Breakthrough treatments developed in Houston laboratories offered hope for previously incurable diseases, while medical tourism brought billions of dollars in revenue to the local economy. The convergence of biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and traditional medical expertise created synergies that positioned Houston as a world leader in healthcare innovation. The city's demographic evolution accelerated as remote work arrangements allowed knowledge workers to relocate from their expensive coastal cities without sacrificing career opportunities. Houston's relatively affordable housing, lack of state income taxes, and improving cultural amenities attracted professionals from technology, finance, and creative industries who had previously concentrated in cities like San Francisco, New York, and Los Angeles. This influx brought new perspectives and capital that further diversified the local economy. Immigration patterns reflected global political and economic developments as Houston continued serving as a gateway for newcomers seeking opportunity in America. Climate refugees from Central America and the Caribbean found their way to Houston, joining established communities that helped them navigate the challenges of starting over in a new country. Political upheavals in various parts of the world brought waves of highly educated professionals who contributed their expertise to Houston's growing knowledge economy. The cultural implications of these demographic shifts were profound and sometimes controversial. Traditional Houston institutions adapted to serve increasingly diverse constituencies, while new organizations emerged to represent communities that had not previously had strong voices in civic affairs. The city's political landscape reflected these changes as candidates from various ethnic and cultural backgrounds sought elected office with growing success. Transportation infrastructure underwent major improvements as federal and state governments finally acknowledged the inadequacy of Houston's existing systems. New light rail lines connected previously isolated neighborhoods to job centers and entertainment districts, while improved bus rapid transit systems provided alternatives to automobile travel. The completion of a comprehensive regional transportation network helped reduce traffic congestion, while making the city more accessible to residents without reliable vehicle access. The downtown area experienced a renaissance as mixed-use development created vibrant neighborhoods where people could live, work, and enjoy entertainment within walking distance of their homes. Historic buildings were renovated and repurposed for modern uses, while new construction incorporated design elements that reflected Houston's multicultural character. The central business district that had once emptied out after office hours became a 24-hour urban center with restaurants, shops, and entertainment venues that served residents and visitors around the clock. Educational institutions adapted to serve Houston's changing population and economy by developing programs that prepared students for emerging industries. Community colleges partnered with employers to create training programs for renewable energy technicians, while universities established research centers focused on sustainability, space technology, and advanced manufacturing. The synergy between educational institutions and local industries helped ensure that Houston's workforce could adapt to rapidly changing economic conditions. The Port of Houston maintained its position as one of America's busiest shipping centers, while adapting to new trade patterns and environmental requirements. Automated cargo handling systems improved efficiency while reducing labor costs, while alternative fuel systems for ships helped reduce air pollution in surrounding communities. The expansion of trade with Asia and Latin America reflected Houston's growing role as a hub for global commerce that extended far beyond energy exports. Entrepreneurship flourished as Houston's combination of available capital, skilled workforce, and business-friendly regulatory environment attracted startups from around the world. Venture capital firms established offices in the city to be closer to promising companies, while successful entrepreneurs reinvested their wealth in new ventures that created additional employment opportunities. The ecosystem that supported innovation was becoming self-sustaining as each generation of successful companies produced the founders and investors for the next wave of startups. The arts community experienced unprecedented growth as Houston's prosperity and diversity created both demand and support for creative expression. World-class museums expanded their collections and facilities, while grassroots arts organizations emerged in neighborhoods throughout the metropolitan area. Music venues showcased genres from every corner of the globe, reflecting the cultural backgrounds of Houston's residents. The city's creative economy became an important factor in attracting and retaining the skilled workers that drove other industries. Sports continued providing shared experiences that brought together Houston's diverse communities, though the city's teams increasingly reflected its international character. Soccer gained popularity alongside traditional American sports as immigrant communities brought their passion for the world's most popular game. Youth sports programs became vehicles for cultural integration as children from different backgrounds formed friendships through shared athletic experiences. Housing development patterns began shifting away from the unlimited suburban sprawl that had characterized Houston's growth for decades. Environmental constraints and infrastructure limitations forced developers to consider higher density projects that made more efficient use of land and resources. Transit-oriented development around light rail stations created walkable neighborhoods that offered alternatives to car-dependent suburban lifestyles. The relationship between Houston and surrounding communities evolved as suburban cities developed their own economic centers and cultural institutions. The traditional pattern of workers commuting from suburban homes to downtown jobs gave way to a more complex network of employment centers connected by improved transportation systems. This polycentric development pattern reduced strain on central city infrastructure, while providing residents with more choices about where to live and work. Political tensions between Houston and the state government intensified as the city's liberal politics clashed with conservative state leadership. Battles over voting rights, environmental regulation, and social issues often pitted Houston's interests against those of rural Texas communities. The city's economic importance gave it significant influence in state politics, but demographic changes in other major Texas cities suggested that Houston might not remain politically isolated much longer. International events continued shaping Houston's development in unexpected ways. Trade agreements opened new markets for Houston-based companies, while creating competition from foreign firms. Military conflicts affected global energy markets and immigration patterns, with consequences that rippled through Houston's economy and society. The city's role as a global centre meant that local leaders needed to understand international developments that previous generations of Houston politicians could safely ignore. The COVID-19 pandemic's legacy included permanent changes in work patterns and urban development that was still being understood years later. The shift toward remote work had reduced demand for traditional office space, while increasing interest in mixed-use developments that combined residential and commercial functions. The pandemic had also highlighted existing inequalities in healthcare access and economic opportunity that required ongoing attention from policymakers and community leaders. Climate adaptation became an ongoing process rather than a one-time response to Hurricane Harvey and other disasters. Each extreme weather event provided new data about Houston's vulnerabilities and the effectiveness of various protective measures. The city developed sophisticated early warning systems and evacuation procedures while investing in infrastructure improvements designed to reduce future damage from floods, hurricanes, and extreme heat events. The energy transition continued accelerating as technological improvements reduced the costs of renewable energy below those of fossil fuels. In many applications, Houston's role as an energy capital evolved rather than disappeared, with the same companies and workers that had dominated oil and gas markets applying their expertise to wind, solar, and other clean energy sources. The transition created both opportunities and challenges as traditional jobs disappeared while new ones emerged requiring different skills. Water management emerged as a crucial issue as population growth and climate change placed increasing stress on regional water supplies. Innovative approaches to water conservation, recycling, and stormwater management became essential elements of Houston's sustainability strategy. The relationship with water that had shaped the city since its founding along Buffalo Bayou required constant attention and adaptation as conditions changed. The story of Houston's evolution from swampland settlement to global metropolis entered a new phase during this period, one characterized by conscious efforts to balance growth with sustainability and equity. The city that had once expanded without limits now grappled with the need to develop more thoughtfully while maintaining the entrepreneurial spirit that had driven its success. The challenges were unprecedented in their complexity, but so were the tools and resources available to address them. As Houston approached the 2030s, it stood as a testament to human adaptability and determination. The city had reinvented itself repeatedly throughout its history, each transformation building on the foundations laid by previous generations, while responding to new circumstances and opportunities. The same qualities that had enabled a speculative real estate venture in a Texas swamp to become one of America's great cities continued to drive Houston's evolution as it prepared for whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead. The future remained unwritten, but Houston's history suggested that the city would continue finding ways to turn obstacles into advantages and challenges into opportunities. The space city that had risen from the bayous was ready for its next great adventure, confident that the spirit of innovation and determination that had carried it so far would guide it successfully into whatever came next. And so we reached the end of our remarkable journey through Houston's extraordinary history. From the Karankawa people navigating the ancient bayous to the astronauts launching humanity toward the stars, we've witnessed one of the most unlikely urban success stories ever told. The muddy settlement that Augustus and John Allen carved from the swampland has become a sprawling metropolis that defies every conventional rule of city planning and geography. Houston's story teaches us something profound about human ambition and adaptability. This is a city that exists where it probably shouldn't, built by people who refuse to accept limitations imposed by nature or circumstance. Through yellow fever epidemics and devastating hurricanes, oil booms and economic busts, racial tensions and social transformation, Houston has consistently demonstrated an almost supernatural ability to reinvent itself when faced with seemingly insurmountable challenges. The same entrepreneurial spirit that convinced two New York brothers to bet everything on a bend in Buffalo Bayou continues to drive Houston today. Whether it's leading the transition to renewable energy, pushing the boundaries of medical science, or preparing for humanity's next steps into space, Houston remains a city where the impossible becomes possible through determination and hard work. As you look out over Houston's gleaming skyline or navigate its sprawling freeways, remember that every building, every road, every achievement represents someone's refusal to accept defeat. The space city that emerged from a Texas swamp stands as proof that with vision, perseverance, and a willingness to embrace change, any dream can become reality. Houston's greatest chapters may still be waiting to be written.